Hey guys, what is up? Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you so much for checking out another one of our super cool studio gear reviews. Today we have another plugin review for you. This one again coming from TAL-Software. Those guys are fantastic. We reviewed the TAL vocoder a few months ago. I have always loved that plugin and I use it all the time. And the guys at TAL saw that video, really enjoyed it, got in touch and said, hey, we would love it if you guys would take a look at some of our other premium and free plugins. So that's exactly what we're doing. They were kind enough to kind of sponsor this by sending us over the licenses so I could check out the full versions of all of their plugins. So we're having a great time going through and getting them integrated into the workflow and all this kind of stuff. I'm loving it so far. And in this video today, we're taking a look at one of their more interesting plugins. Now this one is very cool to me. It does something that I can't say I've ever seen another plugin do. This is the TAL-Sampler, and it is, as their website describes, a lot more than just a simple sampler. You know, there's been a lot of different samplers over the years, both hardware and virtual, and a lot of them, you know, kind of when you think of the term sampler, it's really just any piece of software or hardware that takes samples and plays them back. Could be from a wavetable or, you know, really anything, but that's the general idea. Well, what TAL have done here is that they've created a modern plugin that is designed to emulate kind of vintage sampler keyboards. Okay, so if you think back to like late 80s, early 90s, all through the 90s, companies like Emulation and Sonic, you know, were making these big keyboard workstations that were wavetable synthesizers. So you would import a bunch of different kind of wave samples or sounds. They would all be stored inside the keyboard, and then they would use those both as the basis for synthesis. So they had synth engines that would modify and kind of mess with the original samples that you had loaded in, but they were also workstations in the sense that you could compose and arrange and do loops and store MIDI data and create MIDI arrangements and all this kind of stuff. So what TAL has done is they've taken that concept of these older sampler keyboards and turned it into a plugin. And they've done this in a really ingenious and very cool way in that they're not just loading up, you know, some of these same wavetables that you got on those classic keyboards. They are actually going in and emulating the DAC chips that these keyboards used. Now, back in the day, digital audio was really not that great. You know, we had sometimes 12-bit or 10-bit digital to analog converters, and when you would load in your samples, they wouldn't necessarily be that high quality compared to today's standards. So one of the things that gave a lot of these keyboards unique and differentiating sounds was the type of digital to analog chips that they used that would process and play back these samples at different bit rates, at different sample rates, and each chip that each different company who made keyboards like this used would have its own kind of sonic characteristic. And so TAL has not only gone in and provided a bunch of really, really great sound libraries and sample libraries to use with this thing, they've actually gone in and they have emulated the response of each of these different DAC chips. So like the AM6070 is a DAC chip that was used by different companies back in the day. So we can actually emulate this DAC chip. I've never seen anything like this. It's really quite neat. I think it's amazing that TAL's gone in and actually taken the time to emulate that, and not only emulate it, but let you actually kind of muck about with the settings and do some stuff. You know, you can think of it in general terms as sort of like a bit crusher, but it's a lot more than that. So it's just incredibly cool. And then beyond that, you know, of course, you have all of the other facilities that you would expect and then some. We can layer different libraries. So right now I've got a kind of an Oberheim type patch loaded up, which are samples from an Oberheim analog synthesizer. But you can add layers. We've got a whole modulation matrix down here, so you can assign all, you know, kind of patch different parts of the synth in with itself and do all kinds of stuff. We, of course, have a filter. We've got different amplitude and filter envelopes. We've got 3 different LFOs that can be assigned to pretty much anything. And then down here at the bottom, we've got a very basic EQ. We've got an analog delay, and then we've got a reverb, which are all super, super cool as well. It's great to have those kinds of things built into a synth like this. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through all of the features up here because it is quite complex and it can do a lot. But what I do want to do is I just want to go into these factory presets and just have a listen to some of the sounds that it comes with. Like I said, that was Oberheim. Here's a wood kind of percussion sound. That's nice. It's a little kind of a wood block. I've got my MIDI controller over here if you wonder why I'm looking off to the side. But that's a nice little wood block sound. Got all kinds of cool stuff in here. Bottle blow. That's very, very nice. And, again, a lot of stuff like this is going to be really great, especially when you bring effects after the fact. So if you've got chorus or modulation plugins that you like, or bigger, different reverbs or kind of glitch type stuff, you can always layer that onto something like this if the sounds that you're starting off with are a little bit plain Jane. You can always customize things that way. It's a really nice kind of an FM string patch. I like that a lot. And here's vintage strings. Very cool. Here's Jupiter 8 strings. Very, very nice. And again, we can go in here and we can do all kinds of stuff like you would with a synthesizer, and it's going to use the wavetable, which is the actual samples from the Jupiter, and you're going to be able to do all kinds of stuff with that in here as you would on a normal synthesizer. So if you want to mess with the attack envelope, you can go in and do all that. So very, very cool and very full-featured. So even though you're not actually working with the original synthesis engine, you're just using samples from a synthesizer, you can go in and customize the sound to a great degree, or alter it to whatever you would want. Here's Vector Pad. Ooh, yeah. Very cool. Here's Square Piano. Oh yeah. Very Yamaha DX7. I like that. 80s synth stab. Very, very nice. And as we pull each of these up, it's not only pulling up the sample layers, but it's also pulling up, all kinds of envelope settings and reverb settings and delay and all this kind of stuff. They are fully featured sounds. But of course, you can just go in and select, exactly what sound you're loading. And you can even go in here and mess around with where it's where it's starting the sample, where it's ending the sample, whether or not you want to slice it. I mean, it is really incredibly full-featured in terms of everything that it can do. You can go as deep as you want, just like you could on some of these old sampling keyboards. It's very, very impressive. So we can go through, and if we change to a different DAC, that's the AM6070, but if we go back over to the EMU2, it's almost like transformer emulation or tube emulation or something. It changes the character of the sound overall. It's not really EQ or modulation or anything. It's changing the overall sonic signature of it. And it's doing so by emulating these old DAC chips. And I just think that that's so unique and such a cool idea. I can't say, or I can't think of at least any other plugin that I've ever used that does something like that. And it was, if you talk to guys who were into digital gear back in the day when digital gear was just very first becoming a thing, they will all tell you, EMU's converters sounded different than Sonic's converters, sounded different than Akai's converters. And they each had kind of their own character to them because they used different chips and set those chips up differently to different sample rates and different offsets and all this kind of stuff. It would sound different. The character of the patches would sound different. So the fact that they've taken the time to go in and really emulate how all that's working in a very accurate and realistic way, I just think is super, super cool. Who do I think this plugin is for? Well, I think that if you do a lot of production kind of in more of a vintage style, if you love that kind of late 80s dance, early 90s, all the way through the 90s, kind of old school electronica, down tempo, real classic house and trance, EDM type stuff, this is going to be a very, very cool plugin for you to mess around with, because you're going to be able to get some very authentic sounds to make it sound like you're working with one of these old workstations, which were, by the way, very popular back in the day. A lot of producers used keyboards like this back around that time. So, it's a sound that everybody's going to recognize that you aren't necessarily going to be able to get with other plugins. Just, even if you have access to the same sample banks and stuff, the fact that they've gone in and taken the time to recreate these codecs and the sample rate response and all this stuff, it's awesome. I think that they've done something really unique and really, really cool here. And I won't say it's the most versatile thing, if you're just looking for a catch-all synth plugin that you can kind of do anything with, it could do that, but I don't think it would necessarily be the best choice. It is designed to emulate a very, very specific thing. But if you know what I'm talking about, and you go, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I remember I had an old Korg Kronos or whatever keyboard, and I've always wanted a plugin that could do this kind of stuff. Then you're going to absolutely love this. You're just going to freak out for it. You're going to think it's very, very cool. And I personally never used keyboard workstations like that. They were a little bit before my time, but I do know how important they were to production in early electronic and pop and dance music. And so the fact that we've got a plugin like this that really emulates it that accurately and goes that deep with the emulating the chips and all this kind of stuff, including a lot of those original sound banks, I just think it is so cool. It is so very, very cool. So hats off to TAL. I think they've really done something quite unique and very fun with this one. But what do you guys think? Have you used TAL-Sampler? Do you have other kind of sampler type plugins that you like better? Do you know of other plugins that do this kind of DAC emulation? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below if you know of something similar. I don't personally. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. So very cool, very unique, kind of a niche product, but a very cool one at that. But in any case, chime in the comments down below. Always love hearing from you guys. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. That helps us out a lot. Smash that notification bell. Make sure you get notified when we post new content. And of course, if you want to give this video a like or a share, we would deeply appreciate that. Again, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.